worry, but these seas are going up. But these seas are going up. Nothing but up. Nothing but up. Nothing but up. Nothing but up for me. Nothing but up. Rising up, thought we were buried, but these seas are going up.
On YouTube, super grateful that y'all have been joining, following, and participating. In this experiment, really, and helping us figure out, what's the best way for us to come together. And we've been able to read through Collective Courage, like the ways that our ancestors and countrymen have worked to create their own autonomy and independence while working in collaboration with others that are doing the same. And so we're gonna continue reading about the Federation of Southern Co-ops. Today is a little bit of the dark side of cooperative development and seeking to get economic independence. And so, I pray that as we move forward through this chapter, we realize the significance of what was being done to cause this reaction. I don't want to say that we anticipate it reciprocating or cycling back and happening again, but we should at least be aware of its possibility and seek to ensure that however we move, I'm insecure for our family and our friends and those that are in this movement.
I say, beautiful, brother, beautiful. Right on time with that.
Yeah. Bro, how are you doing today?
Man, it's Black August, man. It's a lot of that energy, man, that Nat Turner energy, man. That Fred Hampton energy, So just stick with it.
For the Wakanda project we're doing, it's also been a time of the other members kind of pulling up the slack, carrying it a little bit. And at today's fundraising meeting later, some really interesting news. a local arts organization might step in at the 11th hour and help us out. So,
What's up?
yeah, make sure you come to that meeting, bro.
Man, I'm 3 o'clock,
4:30.
4:30. I'll be there, bro. I'll be tuned in, bro. Exciting things happening with Okanda, man.
Yes,
Very exciting. Land, right? Ownership.
yeah, like perfect for today's chapter, just to kick it off a little bit.
That's right.
So yeah, we're in chapter 9, Federation of Southern Cooperatives, Practices and Solutions of the 21st Century. Page 204 is where we're starting, talking about asset building that was going on through the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund. And we're seeing at the middle of the page that cooperative agricultural production and marketing help individuals maintain land ownership and made a living from farming. Cooperatively, oh, one second, gotta left the theme song playing on YouTube.
Oh, man.
Okay. Let's see. Cooperatively owned processing plants helped for farmers to earn more money from their produce, retain their earnings, and invest more into equipment, supplies, and land. It was African American land retention was an important objective of the FSC-LAF. So in its first 35 years, the Federation helped save $87.5 million worth of land. That's 175,000 acres at an average of $500 an acre. And they constructed or rehabilitated $26 million worth of affordable housing units. Wow. We're seeing at the bottom of the page, table 9.1, that total land saved for the Federation of Southern Cooperatives from 1995 to 2002, 4,054 acres. Wow. Valued at $3.35 million. Total land purchased that they purchased $1.63 million or 1.63 acres, valued at $1.4 million. I'm going to get into this 5-year comparison of what they've done from 1995 to 2000. So in 1995, they helped 125 farms. Those farms had 54% of alternative crops, had an average gross income of $40,000 and off-farm income of $64,000. Or I'm sorry, they had to get 64% of their income off the farm. Let's see, 5 years later, the Federation was able to increase that number of farms they're supporting from 125 to 192. They were able to bring in more alternative crops, like we were learning how they were helping folks switch off cotton because, yeah. The average gross income went up from 40,000 to 55,000. And so that off the farm income also went down to 52% of their income instead of 64%. The Federation, all of the co-ops and credit unions in the Federation share the same mission. There's also some particular credit unions that are a part of it. Community Development Credit Unions, also called CDCUs, and they were there to provide financial services and loans to mostly rural, low-income African Americans, and provided financial services, saving opportunities, and loans to the members, helping like low-income Southern Black communities build assets, while keeping these credit unions in business continues to be a challenge, especially with large employers that used to be the credit union's base, leaving the area. I'm gonna ask you, Tut, to go over to the table 9.2. This next paragraph on 205 is basically reading, giving a description of what this table is. And so it's saying that the number of community development credit unions, CDCUs, affiliated with the Federation has fallen to 6, down from a high of 18 in 2000. Let's see. It says that the CDCUs have been increasing in number, or the CDCUs have been increasing in numbers of members and assets before the economic downturn in 2008. Total assets were growing until that year to approximately $39.6 million, or about 2.4 or almost $2.5 thousand dollars per member for 11 credit unions. In 2009, the total assets of the CDCUs dropped significantly, but they recovered in 2010, only to drop again in 2011 and 2012. Partly because the number of CDCUs also dropped, although the reduction in assets continued even after the number of CDCUs stabilized. By 2012, the total assets of these credit unions had decreased to 21.8 million, and the average assets per member stood at $2,700, almost $2,800. We're seeing that loans have increased in 2018. The CDCUs made almost 80,000 loans with a total value of $239.5 million. And in 2012, the total of loans for the remaining 6 that closed out of that 17 was 57,000, almost 58,000, still a significant amount. However, the outstanding loans for all of these credit unions dropped significantly to $4.1 million. And so you can see that they don't have very much capital out at the moment. And going over to page 207 on the side of the table, there's a note about why this decrease happened with the credit unions associated with the Federation of Southern Co-ops. And Dr. Nembhard is saying, as of 2011, the number of credit unions associated with the Federation stood at an all-time low of 6. There was also a significant decrease in credit union members in 2007, which reflects the small number of credit unions. The reason for this drop is that over the previous decade, some of the smaller credit unions were forced to merge with larger credit unions, not all of which were in the Federation of Southern Co-ops. This happened around the country to small, rural, and urban credit unions alike. But this trend hit the community development credit unions of the Federation particularly hard. During this period, the federal regulator, the National Credit Union Administration, liquidated or consolidated more than half of the Federation's community development credit unions because of their small size. This explains the dramatic decrease in the number of CDCUs left in the network and why no CDCUs have been chartered in the South in the past 10 years. The Federation explains that the cautious regulatory practices of the NCUA defeat a major organizing strategy of the Federation, which is helping low-income people and distressed communities in the rural Black Belt South to organize and develop their own financial institutions. The NCUA's lack of understanding of the importance of these grassroots financial institutions to the Black community limits the ability of the Federation of Southern Co-ops Land Assistance Fund to provide support and asset building opportunities to its members. And I mean, it doesn't outright say that, like, you know, this is because of racial motivation. I was just talking with my mom earlier about how, like, in this time, you can't really tell, like, there's a high sensitivity to it, but it's like, I don't know, it's just hard to find the receipt sometimes, you know what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't understand from an outside perspective why the National Credit Union Administration would choose to liquidate tons of credit unions just because they're small, especially if they're serving their community the way that they were intended to be served. Kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm. It's really hard to identify racial intent at times. That's by design.
Yeah, and legally, like, that is a key element to a lot of the, like, racial discrimination claims, right? And so as long as they can, like, have their secret societies and, you know, talk behind closed doors, not get on transcripts or documents, like, the stuff can continue without any evidence of it.
No question. We'll get more into it in a later paragraph of today's discussion. Because, man, it's multiple levels. Local in the community, state level, and even federal.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad because, like, 2008 is around the last Great Depression, and then the National Credit Union Administration starts to close a lot of the institutions that are inherently stable and aren't doing the predatory lending that caused the crashes in the first place. It, you know,
Right.
yeah. And this is one of the reasons, like I did some research about this early on in my internship with the law center, and you know, realized that it was like really hard to start a credit union nowadays, and they put a lot of barriers up front, and you got to show like experience, and you got to show that you have um, like the assets to do it, on top of being able to gather your membership and all of that stuff. And I know that it's important, but it just feels like, I don't know, the feeling of it that I get when reading it doesn't feel like it's welcoming. It's like, nah, like you can't do this unless, and yeah.
Right. Unless you get with our program completely.
So, bro, this is the part of the reading that I was really excited about. Read it because it's, I don't know, man, it's truth, you know, and it's something we wouldn't necessarily know unless we go look for it like Dr. Nemhard did. So, yeah, bro, you wanna walk us through?
So yeah, we're gonna get into the Federation Weathers federal investigation. The Federation Weathers federal investigation. I like that. That's a good little title. A little snippet to kind of encapsulate what we finna get into. So let's go. We're gonna start at the bottom of page 207. The Federation of Southern Cooperatives. We're gonna go into like the things that they had to overcome or navigate during the time of these great successes, as we've seen in the previous page. Financially, they were doing great. Faced a little bit of hiccups towards the 2009 late of the early century to the late decade, and then they bounced back. But what was happening on the federal level? What was the enemy doing? What was the society? You know, what was their feelings about the Federation?
Right.
So we start off right now on the bottom of page 207. So for its entire existence, the Federation has operated in the racially challenging context of the rural South. So there was attempts to undermine its effectiveness. It's not unusual. Jessica Nemhard says, the Federation has been vulnerable because it supports not just economic development of Black farmers in the South, but also cooperative development and African American land ownership. So also with the, you know, ownership business, but also with land and, you know, really the economic freedom that we so justly deserve. In addition, the Federation was active in organizing farmers to press for civil rights. So we also getting political there. We talked about it in a few earlier chapters about the importance of being able to be economically free, you know, having a living wage, also owning where you live, and then using that as political strength to really push for what we really need on a national level. So they were doing this work behind the green thumb, you know, behind the working with the farmers, and that's deep,
Right.
man. That's dope.
We read earlier that the same organizations that were doing the civil rights struggles helped found the Federation like early on. So it makes sense.
Right, real solidarity. I mean, I look around today, it's like, you know, you got the workers, then you got the civil rights, and we got Black Lives Matter, then we got, you know, gender rights, and we got on so small levels, you know, we kind of cross and try to support each other. But back then, we were doing a little bit of everything, you know. It's not talked about, but as we look back at the Black print, we see that we was doing everything, man. The leaders of each pocket, they will cross contaminating, germinating each other and supporting each other on multiple levels. So that is key. We have to bring that back, man. But so what was the feds doing? What was the feds doing? What you know, how did the feds look at this type of work? Because we look at it, we get excited. But let's see, the most difficult challenges have arisen when local hostilities and federal policies combine to undermine. So local hostilities, we know what that means. We've seen that with the targeting. They were in the South, y'all. So just imagine, you know, they up here trying to, you know what I'm saying, make sure that the farmers being took care of, get land ownership, and then fight politically. So they had to deal with the racist, you know, crackers of the South. Let me just say who they were. And then also from the feds, you know, so they were getting a lot of funding from the feds. So it says that, as we have seen, baby, sit down, pay attention. The Federation initially received significant support from federal authorities in its earlier years,
Yeah,
you know, when it was really just about cooperatives and
like
farming, right?
it was like over 1 million, right? Like just over 1 million they got from all those different agencies.
Oh, no question. It was back to back in the beginning. First, they got like a couple, 500,000, and they got closer to 1 million, you know, the following few years. And it's like, okay, you know, we was getting excited, like, hey, so the feds do support, but that's the what you call it, the caveat of getting that type of support of a system that we know that we're trying to, you know, fight against.
Right.
And at the end of the day, after they build you up, if they build you up, they can take you down. Like they say, don't bite the hand that feeds you. Well, let's see what's going on. So they were getting the support, significant support from the federal authorities, including grants from the OEO. What did that stand for again? We find opportunity, the United States Department of Agriculture and the Department of Labor. So all levels that was getting support. Yet with the transition in federal leadership during the Nixon era, we've seen national agencies begin to harass and oppose African American economic experiments. For example, the United States Department of Agriculture, which funds cooperative extension services on land grant universities and supports outreach to farmers across the country, blocked initiatives for training about cooperatives for Black farmers in the late 1960s and 1970s, Reynolds says 2002. The collusion of federal and local authorities against Black cooperatives even led to a federal investigation of the FSC in the late 1970s. So this is when Black Power was you know, the threat of Black uprising was really in the face of white America. And we see behind the scenes, we know COINTELPRO was going on, but we see also means of collusion when the federal government kind of teamed up with the racist crackers of the South and the KKK, I'm pretty sure, and, you know, stopped momentum on multiple levels.
Let's switch cameras. So I'll show the page.
Okay. So that is key to understand that was going on. That is deep. That is very deep. So we're here on page 208, practices and solutions. So we were practicing being successful, and the solution by the federal government was to team up with local hate groups, local people that wanted to keep the Federation from doing this great work with our people in the community and completely stop it and try to sabotage it. So we say in the middle, we see in the middle of page 208, according to Bethel, local whites strategized about how to undermine the Federation, which they considered a threat. Now, they weren't blowing up, you know what I'm saying, plantations, which I don't see nothing wrong with that. They weren't attacking, you know, individuals at their home. They weren't really, you know, from what we see, saying that they weren't going to sell to white customers, saying that they didn't want to build with white farmers. They just wanted to specifically focus on building up the Black farming culture and make sure that we were able to feed, house, and support ourselves. And they were seen as a threat. So in May 1979, a number of whites, including representatives of Alabama's U.S. Senators, Congressional Representative Richard Shelby, and others, came together to discuss the Federation. So they teamed up. They had a meeting of the white minds, May 1979, local representatives to discuss the Federation. Eventually, Shelby requested an investigation by the GOA, at the time was called the General Accounting Office, now the Government Accountability Office, the investigative arm of Congress, into the Federation on charges of abuse of federal funds. Abuse of federal funds. So they try to get you on that level. So they like that's where it comes in, abuse of federal funds. And we can see that abuse can be considered if you're not it's a terminology that can be used if you're not following through with what the context of what the loan was given for and making it plain. Like that's how they can hide. That's how racism can hide. It can say, well, you hear about somebody being overqualified, or that, you know, the way that you went about, gaining this support in your community was not the way that we gave you the money for. And by doing that, you're breaking the law. So for one, you can be tried on that. You can be fined, and then you also can lose your licensing. That makes you credible, not only in the white society, but even in our own community, because we understand, to a certain extent, that media can be used to manipulate our own people against one another. So if you see that the Federation is under the scrutiny, that the state is investigating the Federation, if you're in that area, if you're in that culture, you're going to be a little, standoffish with the Federation, and that's another tactic that we see going back and examining the Black Print. So we're going to continue that the GOA was doing, then they came together. So at this time, though, the GOA concluded in September of 1979 that an investigation was unwarranted. In early December 1979, however, the FBI began an investigation. So we say in September, the Government of Accountability Office, which at that time was the General Accountant Office, the people who do the numbers, they make sure that people being accountable to the funds, they already said that an investigation was unwarranted.
Right.
But September, October, November, December, 3 or 4 months later, the feds, crackers, international, they said we're gonna go away. We're gonna go ahead and investigate them anyway. So that just shows you the intent of them starting this collusion to look closely at what the Federation was doing. So doing that, they requested board information about the organization, including membership lists, curricula used in training sessions, and funding proposals. On December 31st, which is right before the New Year's, they were pushing hard. They wanted to get this done before the 80s. They wanted to hit before the 80s. The 70s was deliberate at trying to knock us off our momentum, and they wanted to get this done. So December 31st, the feds issued a subpoena to Executive Director Charles Pigeon. Uncertain of the reasons, of course, of the investigation or the charges, the Federation responded that it would be willing to provide information to specific allegations of individual wrongdoing. See, that's also knowing your rights. So when they push upon you, yes, I will give you my name, but what are you stopping me for? Like, don't just willingly give up your freedom or your rights or what we're doing if you're doing the right thing. And we know in our hearts if we're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. We don't need this system. We don't need, the white man's law to let us know if we know in our heart of hearts if we're doing wrong. So the feds, the Federation, I should say, replied by flexing a little bit. Hey, we'll work with you, but only if on individual wrongdoing, or if you can give us more information, of specifics of what are you investigating this for. We'll work with you. So let's get back to it, but would not agree to turn over information on a general request. Would not just give you my license if you didn't tell me what you're stopping me for. Would not just, I'm not going to sit down if I see you harassing somebody, Mr. Officer. I have a right to observe. So you can't just tell me to leave. People tell you, we see on the camera when we see our brothers and sisters being harassed or something, other officers want to say, hey, leave from it. It's none of your business. It is my business. What are you arresting this brother for? Did you read him his rights? Why is he in cuffs? We have to educate ourselves so that we can defend ourselves, because it might come. Like brother said, we don't want to, attract it to us by saying it's going to come, but we have to be ready. Stay ready so we don't have to get ready. So when we're in these situations, we're not scared. That's why I really support us going to like gun ranges and being comfortable with using different means of protection, because if it pop off, boom, 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 you're not frightened because you've been in the gun range. You hear the boom, you're able to navigate. So stay ready so you have to get ready. And the feds was ready for this, as we see. So let's continue. The Federation, Federation of Southern Cooperatives, and the feds was attacking them, but the Federation was ready. So the Federation compiled and shipped 22 file drawers of information to the FBI office in Birmingham, Alabama. We know about Birmingham. Anyway, the FBI then began to visit Federation members and citizens broadly all over the nation affiliated with the Federation activities. These visits were not simple inquiries, though. or fact-finding missions. Instead, agents ask questions such as, did you know that the Federation was ripping off the government? Like,
Wow.
what? Like, come on, man. Like, what? Imagine if somebody just pulled you to the side, bro, and was like, did you know that Repair Nations was ripping off the government? And it's the feds.
Like, bro, and imagine if it was someone in a like black suit, black hat. They just came out of nowhere and they know all your info. You're like
Come
what?
on, man. Man in black. I'm thinking they finna, you know what I'm saying, swipe my, come on, man. It comes with the trauma that we already know we're healing from. So this is a person of so-called assumed authority coming to bring information. The average person, you know, we're not going to challenge this information that's going to be presented to us. We're going to take it with some grain of interest.
And this
So
next question is ridiculous.
that's very, very divisive, a very divisive tactic. And then the next question, yeah, you want to ask the next question, brother?
Nah, I don't.
Well, look, so we go from, did you know that the Federation was ripping off the government? And then later on, so who did you have to sleep with while you were at the Federation at the dormitories? Like, who did you have to sleep with, bro?
That's
So
crazy.
you could have been asking, it could have been a wife and a husband, you know, doing a double interview, and they asking the wife that. So just dropping them pins, that's a part of COINTELPRO as well. That was the strategy. Like, how they're so strong, they will withstand and rise above and make it through all the physical attack. Look what we've been through, people, family, brother, sister, queen, king. Look what we've been through. So they know